Are we recording? Sorry. All right. Okay. Sorry. Hello, welcome back to the Jump Show. Bit of a hiatus since the Cheltenham Festival, but we are firing once again on all three V12 cylinders, ready for the final couple of days of the Grand National Festival at Aintree. Before we start, please do remember to like and subscribe to this video. It really does help us out here on the Jump Show. We've had a great few weeks since the beginning of the jump season. Really appreciate all your support, and we'd love to finish with a flourish as well. By the time you're watching this video, the first day at Aintree will have been and gone. Hope you all enjoyed it, but obviously we can't really comment on it because at the moment we haven't got the luxury of foresight. However, with that in mind, we are going to be diving in, taking a deep dive into the final 2 days of the Aintree Festival. First up, though, let's see how the lads are. How are we doing, boys? Jake, excited for Aintree, I imagine, generally. We've got some pretty big fields and a lot of those Grade 1 races.
Yeah, it's going to be strange with the ground, isn't it? Because obviously we're bordering on heavy. I'm sure we'll see after the first couple of races today what we're actually dealing with. But it's good to see some good jumps racing. It's been, since Cheltenham, I think it's been one of the worst periods between Cheltenham and Aintree I think I've seen in a while. Like, there's been hardly any good racing at all. Fairyhouse was okay, but it wasn't like, a vintage Fairyhouse meeting. So yeah, looking forward to seeing some good horses out. We've got some Cheltenham winners here. We've got some Cheltenham, festival placed horses here, and it'd be interesting to see how they match up and, come out of their races.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And Dan, I think it's very good of you to deign to give us some of your time today, because I know you're a very busy man on a few other podcasts. So thank you very much for allowing us to have the pleasure of your company.
No, you're more than welcome. The fee's gone up recently, but demand and supply. I studied economics at university after all. I adhere to the laws of demand and supply, so just keep those payments coming. I'll keep turning up and give my mediocre best as usual.
And a very strong fleece as well you got on show there.
Oh, yeah. Didn't get changed after doing the last podcast. Unfortunately, I've been found out there. Didn't have time.
Well, it looks very comfortable, at least. Okay, lads, let's move on to the race itself, shall we? We're going to start by looking at the William Hill Handicap Hurdle. I did think this is an interesting little point on the running order, actually, because we've got the Mild Maze, a race we're going to talk about at the end of Friday. Whereas I thought Dan would be itching to chat about Broadway Boy. But we'll come to that a little bit later. And, of course, Chianti Classico for you lads is in there too. But we'll come to that in a bit. First up, William Hill Handicap Hurdle, 220. Incredibly difficult. Actually, I'm going to put one first forward before you lads, because I really think Katira is almost nailed on to be at least placed in this race. Second in the Grade 1 last year for novices. Has been campaigned very lightly this season. It's got a lovely handicap mark. And we know what the Skunks have been doing in handicap hurdles so far. The latter part of this campaign. So for me, Katira stands out like a sore thumb, and I think she'll be absolutely fine on the potential and likely soft ground. She's won it in the past, possibly a little bit better on faster ground, but I think she'll be absolutely fine. Dan, come to you first. What's your take on this really fiendish puzzle?
Yeah, difficult. Won't be having a bet in the race, but yeah, Katira is a clear standout, has been very well found. The only other two I'm interested to see, because I've already bigged up the form quite a lot, is Castle de Mott's and What's Up Darling, representing the Marlin Pipe form. Obviously were fairly well beaten in the end by the front four, and they shape well enough in their own respective rights. So I'll be interested to see how they get on in a handicap like this, which I suspect isn't as strong as the front four in the Martin Pipe proves. So you can see over them going pretty well, but yeah, very difficult. Some really interesting profiles, a lot of unexposed horses in this race. One I'll be sitting out from a betting perspective.
Okay, Dan sitting out. Jake, are you sitting in?
Yeah, I'll be covering off Katira because I think, as you said, like, she's got a great chance. I think the only thing putting me off having a proper, decent bet on her is the ground for me. I think I'd have more concerns than you do on that regard. I remember at the beginning of the season at Wetherby, when she ran up against the good mares, like she kind of struggled on that ground, didn't she? And she finished third, quite well beaten in the end. So I would happily to have a little bet on her, because I think that she has been laid out for this. A mark of 136 looks ridiculously well treated, considering her form behind Irish Point last year. So I will cover her off. But I think the other one I will go with is Champagne Twist. I think I will have a go on him to back it up again. Obviously, Ben Pauling has been in fantastic form this season. Champagne Twist won the EBF final last time out, off a mark of 124. He really got going late on in that soft ground at Sandown. So, bordering on heavy ground at Aintree should be absolutely perfect for him. He only went up £7 for that win. I think that he's a progressive type, and, I could see him running really well here. Perhaps he doesn't have, as much in hand as clearly as he did last time. But I think he's a progressive horse and he can go well again anyway.
Okay, good stuff, Jake. Thank you very much for that. That is the first race we talked about for Aintree Friday. We're going to move on to the top novices hurdle, the 255, a grade 1 featuring a really excellent field this year. I think it's full of intrigue. You got these two very high-class mares, Dice Artinos and Golden Ace down the bottom. Mystical Power, of course, finished second in the Supreme Novices Hurdle. Mr. Schiff was fifth that day. Firefox was third. And then you got the three runners who didn't even go to Cheltenham. Personal Ambition, Lump Sum, and Dan Overall, Look Away. Horse to follow for the season. First time cheap pieces employed today. Massive price. What's not to like?
The fact that he's Look Away is the barrier. Like, I think he's just had too many hard races, and I think that the break is probably an indication of that. Obviously, his run in the Greatwood or Betfair Hurdle rather when looking certain to run a good race was just quite off-putting. So yeah, happy to kind of just let him win. I mean, he was put up as a handicapper to follow, and he's barely run or got close to a handicap since. He just wants to win graded races, apparently. But this is an interesting race, I have to admit. Second, third, and fifth from the Supreme. The Dice Art Enos, much touted Dice Art Enos, Golden Ace looked so impressive in the Mare's Novice, although it was a relative test of speed, and whether that's a true reflection of form, I would be doubtful. I think Mystical Power will get overlooked, and I think a lot of people will just swerve to go for the Firefox based on the idea that he didn't have the best run in the Supreme. A few things went wrong, and I think that's undoubtedly true. I just think if we're looking at who's the better 2-mile hurdler, I think Mystical Power is probably arguably still the best 2-mile hurdler when it turns into a test of speed that we have. Obviously, he lost the Supreme via stamina up the hill when Slade Steele confirmed 2.5 miler, stayed on really well. They were clear. I think the turn of pace he showed to get into a winning position and jump the last ahead was really impressive. Again, on ground that was deep, he showed he can handle it. Obviously, it was a slow Supreme for 20-odd years. So whatever ground he's going to encounter here, I can't imagine will be too dissimilar to what he faced in Cheltenham. I think as a 2-mile speed horse, he's the quickest of these. I think given how Aintree normally rides, they'll ride him very patiently and come with an idea of coming very late. And I think he will just be quicker than the likes of Firefox, and I think we'll get the job done.
Okay, test of speed is going to stand him in good stead then. Mystical Power for Dan. Jake, what about you?
Yeah, I'd have to be in agreement, to be honest. I don't have a massive opinion in this race. It's quite competitive. There's not a lot in it, but I think if the ground was a little bit quicker than it is at Cheltenham, I'd be absolutely all over Mystical Power. Like, he'd be, the nap of the day. I think he'd take the world of beating. Obviously, with the ground being as it is, it tempers enthusiasm slightly, but I still think he probably is the quickest horse in the race. I'd want to take the mares on. I don't think that they have shown yet that they could be up to this. Obviously, that remains to be seen, especially in Dice Art Enos' case, though. I think, as someone mentioned the other day, she looks like she's been priced up as if she'd won the Mares Novice, and now she's coming into this, even though she didn't even run in it. So, yeah, she's short enough for me, and I think Firefox is one that I'm happy to take on. I think Mystical Power is the quicker horse, as Dan has said, and yeah, it's just that slight ground concern stopping me from having a proper bet on him, really.
I think it's a huge concern, isn't it, the ground, to be honest? We don't know what it's going to be like at the moment, but if it does really come up on the soft, heavy side for this race, then I do think you can do worse than Lump Sum, just because he's handled in conditions. And we've seen him win on heavy pretty impressively earlier in the season. He won the Dovecote on soft last time very well. And if it does become a case of who's going to handle conditions the best, I think Lump Sum is absolutely right up there and is a pretty decent each way price as well. You've got the full 8 runners at the moment, so hopefully that stays the same. And obviously he bypassed Cheltenham too. So yeah, I think Lump Sum could be a big player each way if the ground is on the softer side. So that's my thoughts on the race anyway. But it's a really hard one to work out, isn't it? Loads coming in here with a chance. Let's move on then to the 3:30, which is the feature on the card really on Friday. It's the My Pension Expert Melling Chase, Grade 1 over 2.5 miles. I always think back to when Sprinter Sacra won this race, stepped up in trip. He's kind of the one that I always think about remembering a particular fondness, I suppose, but it's had some wonderful winners over the years. Who are we going to get this time? Well, we got Conflated, Easy Game, Envoy LN, John Bon, Manila Drama, Pic Dorhey, Protectorat. Jake, come to you first this time. I'd be a little bit concerned about supporters of John Bon for a few reasons, namely the Nicky Henderson form in the lead up to this race, even though he's had a winner in the last couple of weeks, hasn't had many runners at all, and the fact that soft ground stepped up in trip. I'd have a few concerns for John Bon winning this race. I think he's worth taking on at 5-2-ish, 9-4.
No, I've been waiting for John Bond stuff up in trip for ages, as you know. I've been banging on about it for the Ryanair I'm going to take the chance here. Obviously, we don't really know. We're recording before the first race on Thursday, so we don't know how the Nicky Henderson horse is going to run. He's got some, proper high class horses that are going to be running. So we'll see how they go, and that will, affect the market as to what price John Bon is. But his current price of 5-2. I think if they were in form, I think he'd be a lot shorter than that. So I think you are getting a little bit of price concession, based on that fact. Yeah, as I said, I've been waiting for him to step up and trip for ages. I hope that would be the Ryanair. Wasn't to be. At least he comes here. He comes here fresh as well. He missed Cheltenham altogether. Yeah, John Bon for me. I think that he could just be. Well, he is on all known form over 2 miles, a class above the rest of these, and hopefully he'll show that over 2.5 as well.
Okay, good stuff. John Bon, pretty emphatic shout there for Jake Price. Dan, what do you think about the race?
I echo a lot of that. Obviously, there are just too many unknowns about John Bon currently for me to get invested in a bet. I think this is a really trappy little race. Obviously, a lot of pace angles in the race. What's the Ryanair form worth? I'm not sure. Will Pick Dory handle the ground? Obviously, he'll go forward. Conflated likes to go forward. Melodrama, likewise, Easy Game won't like the ground. There are a lot of questions about every single runner in this, in my opinion. So it's one of those races where I just put a line through and don't have a bet. John Bon is the best horse in the race, but as it stands, and when we're recording, there are too many questions for me to have a bet.
Yep, fair enough. And I would probably echo those sentiments. Pick Dory, if he gets into a nice rhythm up front, could take some catching, but I think it's going to be tricky, isn't it? All depends on whether John Bon is going to be able to improve or indeed run to his level over that trip. Jake obviously is very confident he will be able to. Let's go on to that 405, the Topham Handicap Chase, Premier Handicap over the Grand National Fences. What do we think, lads? Start with you, Dan, for this one. Anything you fancy in this?
Oh, Jesus, this is a brutal race. Like, I think if it was better ground, I'd be all over Can Do Kid because I think he'd absolutely love this kind of test. I just think they're getting quite concerned about the ground. Obviously, ran really well behind Helton and Newbury when we last saw him on deep ground. Admittedly, I think he is just a very bold jumping type who will really appreciate it, but I'm not sure he'll like this ground. I did think Ami Deji would be really interesting, but he's seemingly been quite well found now. All of a sudden, I thought he was going to be a massive prize because he's a temperamental sort who's only had 3 runs over fences, but absolutely loves deep ground. I kind of went back and forth on this race a while. I mean, Ciel de Neige is in there. I mean, me and Jake spoke about this a couple of days ago. I mean, we both fancied him, I think, last year off 152. Yeah. He's now off 130. And you go back to last year, he was given a terrible ride. He was ridden the exact opposite how you want to see a horse in this race be ridden, i.e. dead last. Snuck into the race, coming to 2 out, and then had a really soft on fall when actually keeping on. He's very now 22 soft. Pounds lower. Yeah, it was one of them where there was a bit more encouragement in his run in the plate when we last saw him as well. Before that, it was typical Ben Haslam, not sighted jobs, but ran a bit better in the plate when last seen. Yeah, wouldn't be. I might have to have something on Ciel de Neige in case he does it because he has just dropped to a ludicrously good mark. But at the same time, he could just be one for Cartmel in 3 months' time. One of those where we'll find out probably relatively early. But yeah, really difficult race, but really interesting race. I'm looking forward to watching this one because I think it's wide open.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I was quite drawn to Ciel de Neige as well.
Oh no. We are screwed.
Oh, we're in trouble here, boys. Sound the alarm bell.
It's been a 2-year plan down the tube.
Yeah.
I tell you what, though, the caveat to that statement is, but I wouldn't be confident enough given his recent efforts to be going in on Ciel de Neige, despite the fact he's dropped.
That's fair.
So, yeah, he'd be. I do like him on that old form, but I just think it's a bit of a leap of faith. But of course, he's a big price, so there you go. A bit of a leap of faith about the one that I quite like in this race, and considering what I just said about Nicky Henderson's stable form, you're going to think, well, he's balmy. But of course, if Sergino goes out and wins on Thursday, then everyone's going to be like, oh, Nicky Henderson's back. So with that in mind, a fantastic lady, I think at 20-1, around about that price, is a pretty solid option in this race. We haven't seen her since December. She's been kept fresh for this. She reappeared with a good fifth, a decent fifth at least, over the fences behind Jaskeel earlier in the season off a 196-day break. I thought she just blew up a bit in the closing stages of the race that day. It was heavy ground. Could be heavy ground again, of course, but I thought she just needed the run that day. I'm sure she'll be primed to go for this. She ran second in the race last year behind Bill Baxter, who, of course, is the favourite for this at 5-1, or at least one of the favourites. And she's only £3 higher than that run. If she runs to anything like that, she'll get a place, I think. And around about 20-1 is a decent price. A fantastic lady who's still really in the prime of her career. She's quite lightly raced for a 9-year-old. So I think there's a lot to like about her chance, provided, of course, the Henderson form, we get him back in full swing this week. Jake, what about you for the Topham?
Yeah, as Dan mentioned, I'm going to have a tiny saver on Seal Dinesh just in case. But if he drifts from the 33 to 1 that he is now out to a bigger price, then you absolutely know he's got no chance whatsoever. And it is planned Cartmel is on. But away from that, the one I'm going to have to give another chance to, I feel like I'm a broken record in these previews, but Frere Bamboo, I'm going to have to give him one more chance.
Please, no.
He gets one more go. Like, honestly, he's got such a nice profile. Obviously, he seemingly hates winning, but if he could just put it all together for once, he would have a hell of a chance here. Obviously, he was third over the national fences in the Grand Sefton in November, as you've just mentioned, Tom, in that race with Fantastic Lady. He was ahead of Fantastic Lady. He'll be better off at the weights with Fantastic Lady. And, going forward, he's ran some really good races as well. He was second behind Can Do Kid at Newbury when he just absolutely stormed around Newbury, like from the front, jumped them like an absolute buck, then made a mistake at the last and got caught by Can Do Kid. He was third behind Fugitive as well. I'm still not over it, as you can tell. Second behind Shake 'em Up Harry on New Year's Day as well. And then in the plate at the Cheltenham Festival, we ran a really good race for sixth behind Shake 'em Up Harry, only beating 7 lengths in, similar ground to what we'll get here. He was off a mark of 133 that day. He's down to 131 now. It's his lowest mark for ages. Off the back of a decent season, it's been busy for him. I can't take that away. He's definitely had a busy campaign, which is probably not ideal for going into a Topham. But if he gets into rhythm, we know he likes the fences. We know he likes the ground. He's off a good mark. Like, I think there's a lot to like about him. And 20 to 1 with like 6 places each way, I think that's a decent bet.
Yeah, I mean, annoyingly, Jake, you always make a good case, and it annoys me because I just didn't want you to make a good case for that horse, but you actually have.
Sorry, mate. You can waste more money with me.
Is there a trainer in weirder form than Venetia at the minute?
Yeah,
so that's
true,
run of 1, and then you go back. It's pulled up, beaten 20 lengths. Last,
they were like all in one day as well.
And next second, like it's like then last again, last beaten 30 lengths. Like it's generally all. She's going through another one of those spells again where it's just she had a little renaissance going into Cheltenham, and now it's just all crap. Really odd. But Frere Bamboo would probably, and it will add to the list of those who went close because it's Frere Bamboo.
He'll jump the last 3 lengths ahead and then just fade around the elbow.
This is what he does.
That's what he does. And what Dan does is always excite people at the start of the season about various horses that he's following. And Dan, there are quite a few of the ones that you like on Friday. We mentioned Broadway Boy at the top and Chianti Classico, of course, one for you and Jake in the Ultimate at the Cheltenham Festival. And you've also got one of your well-supported horses in the past, Cherie Dam, who runs in the Sefton at 440. So, of the other races on the card, Dan, is there any of those appeal or any other horses that you like?
I tell you what, she was some Rick off 115 in the mare's handicap, wasn't she? Lord above.
And she nearly got done.
Yeah, because Harry decided to kick on 2 miles from home. I did not need that heart attack on Boxing Day, but yeah, she's out rocks up in a grade 1 over 3 miles. So she can't have the class for that, surely. I mean, I'd back Croke Park in that, I'd say, because I'm just keen to oppose anything that's in the Albert Bartlett form, because they had brutal races. I mean, it's brutal enough at the best of times, so that was a really tough renewal. I mean, the Jukebox Man, if he runs anything up to form, it would be a miracle, and he'd be one of the toughest horses in training because it was a real slog. So I'd side with him at an each way price in that race. Broadway Boy versus Chianti Classico. Oh, ouch, ouch, my soul. No. There were very few people who would be as enthusiastic about Broadway Boy as me, if any. I think Willie Twiston Davies might have me beat because he thinks this horse will win a Gold Cup, and I may not go that far. I am struggling with him in this race. I don't fancy him really at all. I think obviously there's a reason for the absence. We know that. Obviously he had ulcers and then had a wind issue before the Brown Advisory. I'm not sure he wants really deep ground. I don't think he's that kind of horse, and I do not understand for the life of me why they're putting cheek pieces on him. Like he's one of those genuine horses I've seen, and they've stuck headgear on. It just all doesn't really check out to me. So I'd oppose it. I do think Chianti Classico's got a very good chance. I'd definitely have him over. I know the way you're thinking. Ultima form trumps Kim Muir form pretty much every single time. He did really well there. Handles deep ground. I guess the concern is that this is not an afterthought, but obviously the plan was the Ultima. He now goes into a grade 1, but I think he has all the attributes to cope with it. The ground being no issue. I think he'll go prominently as he normally does. So I would side with him in a race where I think everything has a bit of a question to answer. And yeah, then somehow I think that's basically it on my fancies. But yeah, if Broadway Boy can run a good race, I'd be happy. But I just something doesn't seem right with everything about that.
Okay, good stuff, Dan. I'm going to go to the 440 Sefton. I quite like the chance of Kintara, actually, raised in grade from Handicap Company from the front. He's very, very tough. And I just think he could see a few of these off. There might be a strong traveller, an exciting novice like Reading Tommy Wrong or Shanna Bob or the Jukebox Man that picks him off. But I think him and the Jukebox Man will probably go from the front. But hopefully Kintara cannot be sort of racing early with that horse. And I think he's definitely capable in Grade 1 company. I'm sure of that. I think he'll prove that tomorrow. Or, yeah, if you're watching it tomorrow. What about you, Jake? Anything else on the card?
Yeah, I was quite happy that Dan said Croke Park, actually, because this is one of the most interesting training quotes I've seen in ages. Gordon Elliott said the other day that he was obviously going for the Albert Bartlett, and then he took a stone bruise on the morning that he was supposed to travel across. So they sent Stella Story instead, and Stella Story was going to stay home if they didn't run Croke Park, which I thought was very interesting because obviously he went on to win the Bartlett. But like Dan, keen to take on that Bartlett form. Better Days Ahead I would have been absolutely all over him if he ran here. I think that he would just stay and stay and stay. But obviously he's not running, so yeah, I'll take the chance with Croke Park. Obviously, I fancied him for the Bartlett. This is a similar test, but he hasn't gone to Cheltenham. He's coming here fresh. Jack Kennedy's on. Quite a lot to like about him. 8-1 each way. I'll take a play on that. And then the other one that I would have a small bet on in the last is Maiden Street Prince. I remember Dan flagging this horse to me about over a year ago now, wasn't it? You were talking about him as a potential Cheltenham Festival horse for the handicaps last year. They've taken their time with him, absolutely. And last time out, he ran a pretty decent race. Like he was running in a 2-mile conditions hurdle at Cork, and Sir Gerhard was the 5-1 on favourite. And he came there to at the last, and was pretty much upsize and just took a fall. If he stayed up, obviously he could have ended up running Sir Gerhard close. So he's now in a handicap, which obviously is Charles Burns' modus operandi. Off a mark of 128 in Britain, that looks fine. Philip Burns takes off £3. He's around 6-1, 11-2. I have a small bet on him. Obviously, if it was a big each way price, I'd have a bigger bet. But yeah, I think he's got a decent chance.
Good cases made all round. Good stuff. Let's move on swiftly to Saturday's action, Grand National Day, of course. I'm going to start by looking at the undercard, and we're going to whistle through these. The 155 is our first port of call. Turner's Mersey Novices Hurdle over 2.5 miles. Dan, I'm going to come to you again because Staffordshire Knott is in there. Probably going to be the second string to Brighter Days Ahead for Jiggins, but nice to see him taking his chance at the top level.
Yeah, what an absolute mule of a thing, Lord above. No wonder they've gone for cheek pieces straight away. If any horse needs it, he needs the full works. He is a 2-year project horse. They clearly think a lot of him, but I'd be amazed if he's streetwise enough to win a Grade 1 at this stage based on what we've seen. I think Brighter Days Ahead has got a brilliant chance here. Don't think she had a hard race at Cheltenham at all. Obviously, that mare's novice turned into a test of speed, which didn't suit her. Back up to 2.5 miles on testing ground. I think in opposition, she generally has Willie Mullins' B team, as we're seeing in Jimmy DeSoy, Lantique and co. Coldwell Potter, I think, have to be questioned after such a long absence on the first start for Paul Nicholls. I think we know his main aim is going to be novice chasing next year. Is he going to be absolutely A1 prime, ready for this after a long absence? I wouldn't be so sure. And that Christmas form, for all that, obviously, it's on deep ground, which we know he'll handle. And the form hasn't exactly worked out all that well. So I think Brighter Days Ahead, I think, has pretty much everything in her favour here. I think she's got a real favourite's chance.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, to be honest. I haven't got much to say else than you just said. I think she's got a very solid proposition in that contest. Jake, what about you?
Yeah, no, in full agreement. We spoke about in the Cheltenham Ante-Post series, didn't we, after she won that race over 2.5 miles, how she looked like a 2.5 mile, and it was a slight concern going back to 2 miles at Cheltenham. The only thing that you couldn't really beat her with was the last 2 winners were 2.5 milers, weren't they, who won the Mares Novice, and they went on to, win on heavy ground, and she ended up getting similar conditions, but everything just went wrong on the day. But Jade de Grugy has proved that form to be very good. She's proven to be a very good horse in the Grade 1 at Fairyhouse. So yeah, no, Brighter Days Ahead for me. I think getting the £7, she's going to take a lot of being.
Okay, all in agreement there. Now she'll get beaten. We'll all be laughing. The 230s next up, the William Hill Handicap Chase. It's the Premier Handicap over 3 miles. And Jake, come to you because Krabilly heads the market. It's a horse that you know well. Ran a mighty race, of course, last time out. That was an excellent effort at Cheltenham Vine, shake 'em up, Harry. And I think the bookies, Jake, haven't really missed, have they? The kind of skeleton handicap plots now. And the King of Rye Hope has been backed into around about 5-1 second fav.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, they're the two that immediately leapt off the page when I saw the entries. Krabilli, I think a lot of people were saying that, maybe the Ultima should have been the race he went for. Yeah, he ran a cracker in the plate. You can't really say much about that. But I think going up in trip is interesting with him. If he's going to stay the trip, obviously it's going to be around Aintree. Yeah, he's got a chance, but I think with the price, it's just hard to get fully behind him. Obviously, having put him up at a decent price with Cheltenham, you're now asking to take 4-1 favourite about him. I don't know. I think that's a bit short. I think the one that I am happy to take a bit of a shorter price about is the King of Rye Hope, though, because I think he's just been an absolute plot for this race. This has always been the plan. We mentioned it on the Cheltenham Ante-Post show about how he ran in the Ascot race, the Grade 2. Ran an absolute cracker there. Just made a bit of a mistake at the last. Probably could have won it if on a different day. Off a mark of 137, I think he's really well handicapped. He's getting £3 swing with Kilbeck King as well. I think there's a lot to like about him, and yeah, I'll be happy to play with him because I know that this has been the long-term plan for him.
Okay, good stuff, Jake. I'm going to throw in a big price horse in this race. I've always been convinced that there's a decent handicap to be won with Now, Where or When for the Crawford team down the bottom of the weights. And he is off a very low mark now. He hasn't really been campaigned properly, I would say, this season. He's only had 2 starts, one of which came behind Adamantly Chosen last time when he never really had much of a chance. And both his starts have come in March. So his 3rd start back now. He should be nice and warm for this. And I think he's got a decent effort in him over this 3-mile trip. He's not had that many starts over it so far in his career, and I think he'll like the ground too. Soft ground's absolutely fine for him. And the thing that really appeals to me is that very low handicap mark now in a race of this nature. So I'm going to probably have a couple of quid on him at around about 25-1. Dan, what about you for this William Hill handicap chase? Anything appeal?
Yeah, it's poor turnout, really. Only 13 runners. I mean, obviously, the ground may be a factor in that. The King of Rye Hope would have been a strong selection if the ground was better. I think they've said a few times he probably wants quicker ground, which would put me off there. Other than that, I found it a pretty trappy race. Cruise Control is probably the one I know will handle conditions. Obviously, Love's Heavy Ground has been seemingly a progressive handicap chaser recently in the last couple of starts. He would be my tentative selection, but again, not a race I have a really strong fancy in.
Okay, let's go on to the Grade 1 JRL Group Liverpool Hurdle. And a fairly strong field for this, it has to be said. Flooring Porter is in there, 130. We haven't had Tupu declared this morning. That's a bit of a shame, but it's to be understood, I suppose. Crambo in there looking to regain what was lost at Cheltenham. And a few old favourites, the likes of Champ and Buddy One, of course, who ran a big race in the Cheltenham Festival Stairs Hurdle too. Dan, come back to you first for this.
Yeah, it's the almost Rans of the division again, isn't it? Really, in their absence, obviously they would have been short price favourites. Flooring Porter, obviously, I think they made the right decision in the end to go for the Stairs Hurdle based on that run rather than the National Hunt Chase. A few of these have had many a go at this kind of level and just not proven really up to it, or they're getting old and not in their prime anymore. I mean, the one maybe who's coming on an upward curve is the one Rob Call representative who makes the appearance. That's Hill and Valley Lake. Obviously, I think there's every reason to expect. We haven't seen the best of him over 3 miles yet. Good reappearance run. Obviously, I think the fact that they're not coming here with Irish Pointy Hoopo would suggest they think they've got a more than able replacement in Hill and Valley Lake. And I think it's no surprise that I've seen him probably the most well-backed horse in the past hour or so since declarations, because he's clearly the one coming on an upward curve, whereas a lot of these just seem to have found their level and may just not be good enough to bump into a really progressive type.
Okay, and for you, Jake?
Yeah, not a strong fancy, but I agree. Hidden Valley Lake is the only one that looks progressive to me and could have the potential to be better than all of these. So I'd be playing him. It's just a shame Tupu's not going because he would have been the absolute nap of the meeting if he ran here. He would have absolutely destroyed them.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I'm going to have a pound each way on Proshkima. An absolutely enormous
Bloody
price.
hell.
So make of that what you will. Okay, let's
for his
move on.
love of heavy ground, obviously. Always been a heavy ground horse.
Exactly. That's exactly my thinking. Let's move on to the Randox Grand National. It's the big race, of course, on Saturday. I'll go with my selection first because I'll make it short and sweet. I was really keen on the chance of Vanillier last year. I think he's got an absolutely massive chance again this year. I do think, though, he is a little bit more of a solid proposition, a slightly better horse on quicker ground. I know he's got loads of soft ground form in his book, but I do think if it was like it was last year, he'd have more of a chance of winning. That said, I do think he's got a mighty chance once again. I'm going to go with Galia de Lito as my each way selection. The ground's really come right for her. As you can probably tell from this podcast, I'm a huge Dan and Harry Skelton fan. So Galia De Lito off a really nice handicap mark. She's down the bottom of the weight. She's got a bit of class to her name. She's run a big race in the Classic Chase 2 starts ago, which suggested she should be fine over a trip like this. And she loves deep ground. So Galia De Lito for me in the Grand National. Jake, what do you fancy in the big race of the year?
Yeah, my main fancy for the race is going to be Panda Boy for Martin Brazil. I think that he's just been absolutely laid out for this. Obviously, he was fifth in the Irish National last year. It was a good run behind Iron Maximus, who he'll be £4 better off with. This year had been all about getting to Aintree. He was a very good second in the Leopardstown Paddy Power chase over Christmas. He was 4 lengths behind Meeting of the Waters that day. He's going to be £11 better off with him here. So I think there's plenty to like about him, how he's handicapped off a mark of 146. He ran over hurdles at DRF where he finished 4th behind Maxim. Again, a very good run, but that was just a bit of a run to set him up for the spring. He's managed to sneak in as number 31 in the national, an 8-year-old off 146. He's got the right type of profile for this race. And yeah, I think as long as he really does handle that ground, and he looks like he's got stamina for days. So I think that he would be the one for me. Just for disclosure as well, I've also had a bet on Iron Maximus. I might cover him on the day, but I think that he's another horse who, he's a bit of a lunatic, as we know. But if he jumps around, I think he would have a hell of a chance as well.
Yeah, I think he got a massive chance. His jumping would be an issue for me. I thought he was really sloppy at some of his fences last time, but he's one of those that he just put it all in, couldn't he? If he's just on a going day, he can just jump well.
Exactly.
He's one of those.
Yeah.
And Dan, for you on the Grand National?
Yeah, so a couple I have back last week. The first one is Meeting of the Waters, who suddenly became a plunge horse for the race. I may or may not have had something to do with that, but I just really like this horse. I watched that Ultima back. Obviously, because I was so fixated on Chianti Classico, I was kind of ignoring everything else. So I wanted to watch that race back. And Meeting of the Waters went through that race like a horse who had a serious amount of upside still left. Obviously, we know Chianti Classico and Twig were handy throughout, basically 3rd and 4th throughout the race, exactly where you want to be for an Ultima. Meeting of the Waters was ridden with a lot of restraint. The move he made to get into contention was impressive. How he travelled through that race was very good. And he wasn't really asked for an effort until after the last. And if you actually look at that back, he stayed on really strongly up the hill when he had probably every excuse to fade. Look, him and the Goffer made very similar moves. Look where the Goffer finished. Look where Meeting of the Waters finished. So I know there's stamina doubts. There's stamina doubts about 90% of the runners in here on a 4 mile 2 heavy ground national. I think that's just kind of the risk you have to take. But I think other than that, he's shown a really upwardly progressive profile. And I think the race is shaping up now to maybe go against how the old trends were. Because obviously a 7-year-old novice would have been an automatic red flag 10 years ago. But obviously the fences are softer. We have less runners. I think we're likely to see a reality where the progressive novices take more of a hold in these races now, just like they do in basically every other major handicap. I think there's reason to suggest the shape of the race is changing. He's technically well in. I wouldn't really read too much into jockey bookings. Obviously, Danny Mullins rode him to win the Paddy Power. I think that they kind of booked themselves, really, rather than it being a case of he's number 1, he's number 2, that kind of thing. So I'd be strong on Meeting of the Waters. I really like his chance. And I've also backed Galia De Lito. I backed her last week as well. Yeah, bollocks. It's like obviously no mares won since 1951. Yeah. You shouldn't be that happy. How most of these go for me. But ran really well in the Classic, and I think she's just one for staying handicap chases. She's generally been found in these small field mares races. I don't think really suits her. She's a proper stayer, and I showed that in the Classic when obviously only beaten very narrowly by My Silver Lining, who's franked that form in 2 handicaps since. Giving her £20 was a monumental effort. Loves heavy ground, still unexposed as a staying chaser. The Classic Chaser produced many a Grand National winner. She gets in off a fairly low weight. I think she's one of the more likely ones to stay as well. Yeah, I think she's got a lot going for her. If you ignore that previous running mares company went, I don't think she was really fully geared up for that. They said after the Classic, it's all about the National. She's here off a low weight. I think she's got a solid each way chance on conditions she'll like.
I am in good company. Thanks very much, Dan. Galia De Lito for both myself and for Dan. Right, lads, on to the rest of the undercard on Saturday. Anything else appeal? Come to you, Daniel, first.
Okay, this one people won't like because this horse has had my pants down so many times, it's not even funny. But one more chance. The 120, the 3 mile handicap hurdle, Red Risk runs again. Oh, my lord, boom. This horse needs 4 things. Okay, 4 things: 3 miles, tick; galloping left-handed track, tick; soft ground, tick; time between races, sort of tick. He's got all those boxes ticked. So he's got no excuses. I think, forget Haydock. He never went a yard. I don't think he really liked the track. But you go back to that run behind Botox House in the West Yorkshire Hurdle. He should have won that race. that reads well now. That's obviously done pretty well since. Freddie Gingtall's back on board for the first time since being a short head second in the 2023 Lanzarote behind West Balboa. Now, see, she's the favourite for this race. Red Risk is £7 better off for that reappearance. And I think there's reasons to suspect that Red Risk probably prefers a 3-mile heavy ground race more than she will. And bearing in mind, there's just a massive discrepancy in price. She's 6-1-ish. Red Risk is 33-1. Cheek pieces on for the first time. If ever there's a horse who looked like he needs cheek pieces, it's Stafford Shin Knot and Red Risk in that order. So he needs that headgear. So I think that'll be. I think he's got everything in his favour to run a good race. Will he? Probably not, because he's an absolute rogue of a thing. But I can't leave him on back to 33-1 with his conditions that are ideal.
Fair enough, mate. I love that. That's good stuff. I'm going to put in my couple on Saturday's undercard. I quite like Lord Snooty, actually, in the first race of the card. The Premier. Yeah.
talk about a horse who needs headgear. Lord of
yeah, well, this is the thing, though. He's so weirdly erratic that if I'm convinced he's well handicapped, he'll love the ground if he's up to his best. He ran a mighty race at Haydock 2 starts ago and beaten half a length by the well handicapped Cuthbert Dibble. He runs to that level, he's been bang there or thereabouts off his mark of 125, just £3 higher. He was never going at any stage at Uttoxeter last time. You're going to have to overlook that. But he's one of those horses that just throw in bad runs, and then he can easily bounce back, as he did 2 starts ago at Haydock. So I think he's absolutely worth a little play at 16-1-ish each way, Lord Snooty, because there is most certainly a handicap in him off his current handicap mark. He's a 7-year-old, still loads of time for him. So I think he's got a decent chance, if on a going day, of course. And the other one I wanted to mention is actually Etalon in the 5 o'clock Maggle Novices Chase. Absolutely extraordinary that the 2-mile Novice Chase Grade 1 at Aintree is 5 o'clock on Saturday after the Grand National. I'm absolutely astonished to see that, to be honest.
Yeah, very strange.
Mad race planning. I mean, it should be to take centre stage, shouldn't it? Or at least more centre stage on a different day, perhaps. But Etalon, I was at Sandown when he actually sluiced up a handicap company off £11 lower. Loved watching him do that. Interviewed Dan afterwards. Dan said going to go straight to that Grade 1 at Aintree. Probably not going to go in the handicap routes. And here he is, lining up, around about 6-1, very unexposed, doesn't do anything wrong yet. Obviously, stepping up in grade, jumps exceedingly well for a novice. One of the best novices jumping you'll see all season. And looking forward to seeing him stepped up in class. Whether it'll be good enough remains to be seen, but he deserves a crack at the top level. Looking forward to seeing Etalon. 5 o'clock, set your alarms on Saturday evening for that Maggle Novice Chase. In case you've forgotten, it's after the Grand National. As some of you might think, oh, the Grand National's over, we'll turn it off. Don't turn it off, because Etalon is running in that Grade 1. Jake, what about you?
You just done the racing journalist equivalent of, I've given the horse a pat, and now he's going to win his next race. I've interviewed the trainer, and he's going to win.
Yeah, I tried to make it a little more opaque than that, but I've been found out.
Yeah, 2 for me as well. I'll go for Johnny Who in that 3-mile opening handicap chase. I just think that a mark of 136 could underestimate him. He's shown plenty of ability before. Obviously, he was a very good winner at Carlisle. Was 2 lengths behind Captain Teague in the Challow, where it was pretty brutal ground that day. He stayed on strongly. Obviously, he was just behind the jukebox man. So I'll give him a go. I think that he could be very well handicapped if he puts it all together. And then in the 5 o'clock, the Mako, I will just have a chance on Founder 50 if he stays above 2-1. I think that he's just the best horse in the race. And, you know, he ran an absolute cracker in the Arkles. So if he pitches up here, the ground will be fine. Everything should be fine for him. I think he will take the beating.
Talking of John Joe O'Neill, Jake, and Dan, arguably the most exciting horse they've had for some time runs in the bumper at the end of the card. Mr. Megget in the Trevor Hemming Silks, late Trevor Hemming Silks. So far, he's had 2 starts in bumpers. He's won both with ridiculous ease. On debut at Carlisle by 12 lengths and under a penalty last time at Doncaster. Again, he didn't come off the bridle. Again, not a great race, but at the same time, he couldn't help but be impressed. And this is his big acid test to step up into this graded company, Grade 2, of course, for the final race of the meeting. But I have to say, of all the horses actually on show at Aintree this weekend, he'd be one of them, the ones I'm looking forward to most. Can't wait to see how good he is. Hopefully, he can put John Joe O'Neill back in the big time. But we shall see.
It's a very weak bumper now.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah, way to rain on my parade.
Yeah, haven't they? Yeah.
Sorry,
no,
it's fine. It's fine. No, it'll still take. It always takes winning. Whoever runs in that race.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully he can do the biz. Gents, Been a pleasure. What a great fun that was. Great fun. So enjoy the next 3 days, the next 2 days for everyone watching the podcast. And hopefully some winners in there as well. I think, Jake, we're going to be back for Punchestown. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to try to do a live stream for Punchestown maybe the day before. Keep an eye on socials. We'll put out something when we confirm the date and the time. But yeah, we'll try to do something for Punchestown for you.
Okay, we are at the time of recording 5 minutes away from the first race at Aintree, so we are going to scuttle off to go and watch it. I hope you will enjoy it, and thanks very much. Remember to like and subscribe, it really does help us out. Until next time for that live stream, we will see you very soon.